Would you love to create better habits for your home atmosphere? Do you love the idea of creating a morning routine that really brings life to your family and helps you feel more at ease and in control of your day? In the Restoration Home community, every month we focus on three habits that are going to create a more peaceful, flourishing family culture. And we only open 4 times a year to new members. Right now, the Restoration Home community is open. You can save 10% on your membership with code Restoration10 if you join before we close. We close in a week. And when you join, you get a weekly lesson with ideas for connecting with your children. You get these habit trackers, a book list. We're doing a mom book club this year, focusing on beautiful titles for a life giving home. You also get access to incredible mentor moms who give you encouraging workshops on building better habits and on tracking your time and on even spreadsheets for planning your homeschool. So, if you're a mom who's looking for help to create a more peaceful, flourishing family culture, the Restoration Home community is here for you. We're open now. Save 10% with code Restoration10 at restorationhomecommunity.com. This is Jennifer Pepito with the Restoration Home podcast. This is the show where we talk about cultivating a flourishing family culture through life-giving habits. Today on the show, I'm so excited to be chatting with Rachel Kovac. She's one of my dearest friends, and she has a new book out called Their Future is Shining Bright about homeschooling in high school. And I'm so excited to chat with her about it today on the show. Thank you for joining me, Rachel.
Thank you so much for having me, Jen. I'm so happy to be here.
I have gotten to spend time with Rachel and with her amazing children, and so it's really fun to read your words, Rachel, because we've talked on Voxer after you were done reading the Institutes of the Christian Religion to your children, or we have had our kids sit and sing together and play guitar together. Like, we've had some in-person time, and so reading this is this amazing peek into a family that I already know is so lovely. And tell your children Auntie Jen says hi. Also, I mean, right off the bat, I actually want to talk about Iris's woodworking project. You have a chapter that's so beautiful about, the balancing like interest-led learning and more structured learning. And I think it's in that chapter that you talk about Iris building a whole chicken coop and having to plan out like how to get at the hen boxes. And I already know it's Iris who's kind of the musician too, right? Like, isn't she another one who likes to play the guitar and stuff?
Most of the kids play an instrument or several instruments, but yeah, she does.
Yes, because she played at a Wild and Free conference.
Uh-huh.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, yes. So tell me a little bit about her woodworking project. That sounds so involved.
Yeah, so I think what I was trying to put forth in that chapter was that I think we don't have to have two ideas at odds. One is that everything must be very structured and look exactly like school. And the other is, oh, let's throw out all of that and just have it be all interest led. And so the idea that I was trying to put forth was that we can have a combination of both. And I think there's real power in both. I think it's important for kids to learn how to do things like math, which can open so many doors, while also then putting that into practice by doing something like a woodworking project or a sewing project, things where you're actually seeing it visualized, where you're seeing, why does this matter? And it can ignite the passion behind the theory.
That's so smart. And it's interesting. You actually talk about that later in the co-op chapter as well. So in this chapter, you kind of talk about how Iris was curious about math, but then the math concepts became tangible when she started this woodworking project with her dad. And I'm sure it's beautiful. I'd love to see a picture. But then later on, you talk about how Indigo and Jude were, needing to take some upper level science classes and not necessarily super interested, but they had somebody who was really passionate about it who taught the class. Can you tell us a little bit about just how having somebody, because I think part of the thing is people get so scared about high school because they think I can't teach this. I don't understand it. And for you, you have used this combination of both learning alongside your children. Like in the humanities chapter, I love how you talked about you reading these big books with your children. And it was like something you were interested in. It was over their heads. So many people would say that is over their heads. And yet you just sat down and plowed through these amazing books with them. But then you didn't just try to go it alone in every area. You actually did bring in some experts. So would you just talk for a minute about the situation with the science class I took? Because I think that's so key for families.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because both of my kids that are adults, both of my adult children are STEM majors. And I just did a podcast audio with them on homeschooling and then going into STEM. So, yes, we did a lot of reading aloud, but also I wanted them to have the sciences. I wanted them to have a strong education in the sciences. And I'm really not. That's not really my strength. I didn't have time. You know, when you have a big family, you only have so much time. You can get stretched really thin. So I knew I wanted to pour into the things that made me come alive, which is the humanities, the art, the reading aloud. But the cool thing is about homeschooling in high school is there are so many options for most students in these classes that maybe we don't want to teach, whether it's a local co-op, whether it's dual enrollment, or if it's an online course here or there. I think we don't have to do it all. We can be more like this director or curator of a beautiful education, doing the things that we want to teach that make us come alive, relearning things that maybe scared us in the past. I never thought I loved history, but I have learned to love history, learning it again with my children, or even revisiting algebra with one of my daughters right now. So we can throw off some of the baggage that we had around subjects that didn't delight us at one time. We can choose whether we want to go and explore those again or if we want to outsource some things and really come to land somewhere that's best for our family. For families that love the sciences, then they might want to teach that and outsource an English class.
Yeah. One of the pitfalls that I've seen for families, we've also used some online classes or in-person college classes or in-person charter school classes, which I think has been really key for my children excelling in high school, is having some of those upper level math and science classes outsourced. But one of the pitfalls I've seen for homeschool families is once they get their kids learning some online, like whether it's a co-op class online, whether it's a, class, there's people like Veritas or whatever who sell, they're more like a Zoom call with a teacher. Once they get on those online classes, they sort of start to think that they're too big for their britches. Like, I'm not going to join my family morning time anymore. I'm not going to listen to mom read out loud because now I have my own work to do. How did you keep your kids, your high schoolers, still engaged with your morning time where you guys were reading these amazing books together, even though they had their own stuff? Because I think that's when the high schoolers start to have the excuse, I have too much work to do. And then the family learning and the real like Socratic kind of discussion and reading of great books together falls off.
Yeah, I think we just really prioritized that time together, even in terms of what we were scheduling. We didn't schedule classes as much as possible in the morning. There were some times when Indy was driving to go to a class that she could only take at, let's say, maybe 11 o'clock. And so we had to cut things a little bit short. And I would do the reading that's more geared toward the older kids first with her this is when she was still in high school, and then read aloud to my younger girls after she left. But I think that was really a non-negotiable part of our day because I think it's so important to be, and it was something that we all enjoyed. I think we were all interested in what we were covering. It wasn't just, and it was part of what we were putting on their high school transcripts.
Yeah. One of the things that I love about you is how creative your family is. Like, the music and the art, and you sent me some photos of you're doing some Playful Pioneer stuff, and you sent me some photos, and they're just so beautiful. Your children's drawing, everything you guys do is with such excellence. And one of my like own personal sort of propositions or I can't think of the word right now, but my hypothesis about that is that it's because your family doesn't spend a lot of time on social media. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how, as your kids move into the teen years, because I think that's another thing that starts to really stifle creativity and productivity in teens. Like, it's the time in their life when they should be the most poetic and artistic and creative and really getting stuff done. And yet social media starts to just kill all that drive, and they become mere consumers of absolute filth and stupidity. And so I'd love to hear how you like, how you've helped your children. Because, obviously Jude and Indy now have their own choices about that. But how did you help them get through high school without becoming brain dead?
Yeah, I mean, Jude and Indy have chosen to not have any social media presence at all, and yeah, they are pretty hardcore about not wanting to spend time on their phones. I think it was another thing that was really not something that was negotiable for us. In my pre-order bonuses, I have a conversation with Aaron Lochner. Now, I don't go into teens and social media in my book. It was just beyond the scope of what I could cover because I got so much into this book, more than I ever thought possible, mostly because of the editors at Tyndale. They were able to really help me get structured in terms of what we could get into one chapter. So I think it's a dense book. But Aaron talks about social media, the teenage brain, having restrictions around phones and boundaries around phones. I was so excited. Yesterday, I brought Tia to a hair appointment, and her hairdresser was saying she only allows her daughter to have 1 hour a day on a phone, and is otherwise locked down because otherwise they might spend that time on social media, texting, and it takes away from other things you could be pursuing, like instruments, reading, and those kind of things. I think she was saying that more and more parents are making this choice, so you're not standing alone. It's kind of like you started homeschooling in the early days where very few people did it. Now it's becoming more widely accepted. In Texas, right now, I read in the Houston Chronicle that there are twice as many homeschoolers as kids in private school, which is wild. And so I think as more and more parents start saying, we want a different way for our teenagers, then you're less of the odd one out. But we just simply had a policy that they couldn't spend a lot of time on phones, that they weren't allowed to have social media or access to the internet.
Wonderful. And really that, in a way, trained their taste in such a way that even as adults are not that interested.
Well, and just for the record, to be consistent, we did allow Jude to be on Instagram here and there. He never had any like addictive tendencies towards social media at all, and was just using it for creativity. But then ultimately we decided, and maybe you've been here too, like, no, we're not going to do that anymore. Even if we did that for him, we're changing our mind.
Yes, and I've definitely been there. I think that you live and learn. Like, we don't always know for sure. With my youngest child, he had a Gab phone until he was 16, and I would never ever switch to anything else if I think that as long as you can keep your kids off, the better, in my opinion.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'd love to talk a little bit about how you read some of these books, because I'm saddened by how many people think that reading aloud is too hard, or they squeeze out, like they think, oh, we've got to spend all these hours on the good and the beautiful workbooks, so we don't have time to read out loud. They think that reading out loud is like the afterthought, and it's the workbooks that are the main core curriculum. And that breaks my heart, because there's so much that is taught through the reading aloud. The vocabulary is taught. The morality and character and virtue is taught through reading aloud. The imagination is shaped through reading aloud. Your sense of beauty, your sense of how words should go together, all of this is taught through reading aloud. That can't be replaced by, multiple choice or little, like, small bits of text. And you guys did a lot of reading aloud, and some really hardy books that can't have been easy. How did you help your younger ones, like, stay engaged while you're doing that with your high schoolers? And then also, did you ever use audiobooks as an asset to that?
Okay, yes. So I just talked with my kids in this audio I mentioned, and they said that reading aloud was one of the best practices that we ever did, that it, formed our connection as a family, made us so close. We always had things to talk about, stories we could relate to. And the only thing that they said that they regret that I made them do in all of my years of homeschooling them is Moby Dick. They said that was the one. They're like, Mom, most of it is not even scientifically accurate, and we could have read an abridged version. Like, we didn't have to hang with that book, but otherwise everything else they said they really enjoyed. I think that in terms of reading for my younger kids, it's fine if they want to do other things. Sometimes they will hand stitch. Well, I'll give them a basket of fabric scraps and they'll hand stitch or color, or, just do something that's more kinetic while they're listening. I don't require them to be locked in on things that, like right now we're reading Augustine. So if my 8-year-old isn't locked in on that, that's okay. They do get a lot more than you might expect, though. They really do. And yeah, I just think it's so important. We're loving doing the Peaceful Press this year. It's been so fun. We love the books. The girls love the crafts. They love the art study. It's just the right balance. It's not too much. We can add in some grammar. They can do their math, and it just feels so rich and so beautiful. We're just enjoying it so much.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. So did you read all those books, or did you ever like put
Oh,
on
you asked
audio and
about
do some sewing
audiobooks.
yourself?
Oh, yeah. I do a mix. We're actually doing all of the Little House on the Prairie series through, the Playful Pioneers with the audiobooks.
Okay, fun.
And actually, you know what? I think I'm more kinetic than my kids. I think they're okay. Like, they're okay sitting and listening, but it's hard for me to sit and listen. So I clean my kitchen, mix up my sourdough. Usually our kitchen is trashed after breakfast. So when we're doing the Peaceful Press, I'll do all the reading, and then we end with the Playful Pioneers audiobooks with Little House on the Prairie, and then I'll clean the kitchen, mix up sourdough, prep dinner or something while we're listening.
Which
And
her books are read so well. I did the Playful Pioneers twice with my kids. The first time we read the stories, second time I did them on audiobook, and then I would make my own notebooking pages or watercolor paint while we were all listening together. So I think there are definitely, and I think that's so encouraging for families, because you should read or listen to these big books. And if you as the parent aren't reading or listening to big books, your kids aren't going to either. Like, it's going to be hard to get them to read because we're setting that example. But when you can, and whether it's on your car trips or while you're cleaning the kitchen or while you're all sitting down together, read these big books. So what, like, of those, because those are, I mean, you read Dante. I can't remember which Dante you talk about in the book. It's not Inferno. It's the Divine Comedy, maybe.
yeah, they're all part of the single. That's one. The Inferno is one of 3 in the Divine Comedy.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
So you guys read that. You read the Institute of the Christian Religion. Like, how much of
Well,
that
we
was?
only, oh, excuse me, we only got through 2 books of John Calvin's. I think we liked book 1 more, although it doesn't really matter what my own personal opinions are. It was just a classic book that we were reading. I read widely. It doesn't mean that I agree with everything that I'm reading. Do you know what I'm saying?
I totally get what you're saying. And I
But
think that's so wise that your children are getting a real humanities education, because they're not reading books in high school, in public schools now. Like, I can tell you, they're definitely not reading classics. They're definitely not reading Christian classics. If they're reading at all, it's an anomaly.
it's often excerpts, which has surprised me. Even in the best school districts in our area, I'll ask, how many books have you read? Now, granted, I'm not anti-schools. There are great schools. There are schools where kids are reading. So I'm not trying to sound adversarial, but I was surprised that they had them reading mostly excerpts.
Right. And if it's an excerpt, like my son has been doing a California charter school the last couple of years. So it's like some classes are at the campus, some are managed at home. But the literature textbook is excerpts from the most sad and depressing literature with the most confusing questions possible. Like, in our homeschool, we read together and then we talked about the books. And we still will, we read the Psalms, we talk about the what we're reading. That's not how it works in public schools. And so it's like such a step above. Like, I could see why. I just watched a little video by someone talking about how Harvard was headhunting homeschoolers. And I can see why, because they're actually reading real books and they understand Western thought.
Yeah, and I think even if you don't agree, sometimes, I mean, this is just my own opinion, but sometimes people can be afraid of reading something that they don't agree with. But I think it was really good because it exposed our kids to a wide variety of ideas. And then when they got to college, we had talked about a lot of things. They weren't really surprised by new theology or new ideas. It was all familiar to them. So they could easily drop into conversations with various denominations and know, okay, this is what they believe. Sometimes better than the people who themselves were a part of that denomination.
Yeah. The other thing, like, I don't know how you made time for everything, because I've seen, just your family is beautiful. Your home is beautiful. Your kids are so artistic and so well read and articulate. And you had 6 kids. It's not like you only had 2 kids. Like, how did you manage and you're a really good friend too. Like, I don't know how you read so many beautiful books, also took your kids to like math or science co-ops as needed, and made sourdough and sewed beautiful clothes. Like, I'm sorry, this episode might not make people feel very empowered because you just have done so much so well. But I would love to hear, because I think sometimes people are too much giving ourselves a pass to be a little bit lazy in raising our kids. Like, it is a short season, it will be over fast. And so why not put a little effort in? But I'd love to hear, like, what are some of your daily habits that have helped you accomplish so much as a mom?
Well, I think that there are a lot of things that I would not think I'm very great at. Like, I don't think I'm the best housekeeper. My kids all have to do a lot of chores. So I think, my husband works a lot. And so everyone has to help. My kids take turns making a dinner. We all have to help with chores. I'm not like a mom that does everything for my kids. Like, there are parents that fold all their kids' laundry and they make every meal and they, are the only ones cleaning. And it's like, that's not how it worked at all in my house, having a big family. Like, everybody has to contribute. And so I feel like it's a real team effort with a large family. Don't you think? I mean, you had a large family.
Absolutely. I mean, definitely everybody had to chip in. And then I
And so
think
it's
that,
not all just weighing on me. I didn't have the mindset of like, your only job is academics and my job is to do everything else. It was like, no, we're all in this together. And so, like, yeah, we have chickens. That's kind of been my kids' project. And so they let them out and they feed them and they clean the coop. I'm not doing that. That's been their interest. And then, that's something that they do. Because as homeschoolers, I think we have the gift of time, right? And so our kids have a lot more time in a day too than if they were in school because they don't have to spend, especially in the younger years, as much time learning. So we're spending our mornings. I have always really dedicated our mornings to that morning time for 2 to 3 hours. But then you have the whole rest of the day. And we haven't done a lot of things outside of the house until our kids are older. So we do one co op day a week. And then I have that day free, but they're not going like every day to co op. And then my older daughter, who's in high school now, she goes 2 days a week to some classes, chemistry and a grammar class. But yeah, I mean, I think as homeschoolers, we have the gift of time. So
yeah, I think this is such a good reminder too that if you want to homeschool and do it really well, you probably, every person is so different. But homeschooling in this way, where you're reading books and you're really developing a connected family and you're really preparing your children for life, it does actually require being at home some. Because so many of I think part of what throws moms off is when they're involved in a lot of activities. Like, they have a co-op one day and another co-op another day, and then they have sports and swim in the morning another day. And so it can feel like, oh, I don't have any time to manage my home or read out loud to my children. And it's partly just the way you're choosing to live. And I'm not criticizing that because every family has different goals and expectations. But if one of your goals as a family is to be really well read, to be really connected, probably you're going to have to plan to spend a few days at home instead of having an activity outside of the home every day.
yeah, my kids don't really do sports. Like, we do value hiking and exercise and things like that, but we don't do the sports thing. And that can be a really big time commitment. They do music. So they're in the youth orchestra, they play violin and cello and then guitar for fun. But that's just one day a week. It's not the same kind of commitment as. But I think in the older years, it's just so fun. And when you have drivers, I don't actually have a driver right now, and that has put a lot on me because it gets to be more driving when they get older. But you know what it's like when you have kids that can drive. Doesn't that make such a difference?
Yes, I mean yeah, it does. It makes a big difference. You don't see them as much anymore, and that breaks my heart.
But they can help like drive themselves places. You don't have to be the one driving them to co-op or to
Right.
their, enrichment or, dual enrollment, wherever
Yeah.
that is, or
Yes.
college.
Yes. Yeah, now that I only have, a few kids left at home. My son did get his license when he turned 16, but he doesn't have a car of his own yet, and we haven't been as helpful maybe as we should, but partly I'm not that excited about having him be able to just drive off. Do you know what I mean? Like, I really like having him around. So don't tell him I said that, Rachel.
Our 16-year-old is also not driving. You know, kids are not as eager to get their license necessarily as they once were, but we are in a city with a lot of really intense traffic, and she's taking her time, and I'm totally fine with that. And I also know as I get older to really value these times of driving her and having her in the car and all the conversations that you have when you have a child in your car and it's just the two of you. Like, that's so special.
Yeah. I'd love to talk for a minute. We don't have a ton more time about like Jude is in medical school. He's doing really well. He has an internship with a very prestigious medical center. How did he get from being your homeschool baby boy to being on a path to become a doctor?
Well, I think he really fell in love with science. Has loved, he knew he wanted to be a doctor from the time he was around 12 years old. And then he just was really dedicated toward that, working toward that goal and not giving up. And then he just loves science. And yeah, he got into this program at the Mayo Clinic. And this year was very competitive. They were only accepting 8 students in all the nation, and he was accepted. So that was so exciting. And we're really, really proud of him. Um, I mean, the Lord's providence, I guess.
Yeah, I know that you are a very disciplined and diligent person, but did you do like a lot of science workbooks in the early years? Like, how did you teach science to Jude up until middle school?
Actually, you know what's so funny? And the kids and I talked about this just last week. No, I didn't. I didn't teach science. But I did do a ton of reading. It was important to me that they could think critically, and we did a lot of math. I think that sometimes homeschoolers love the humanities, but don't always care for math and don't want to put the effort into math. Well, I don't know. That's like a generalization, but sometimes I hear that to be true, that they just don't like math. And I think what I heard some first generation homeschoolers tell me once was, if your child can read and if they can do math, they can do anything. Like, all doors are open if you have those skills. And so even though science isn't exactly math, my kids feel it's that sort of part of the brain that you're thinking, the way that you're thinking about things, and that knowing how to do math set them up well to get into the sciences, find them beautiful, interesting, compelling. And so once they got into high school, they just kind of ran with that on their own.
Yeah, I think that's really encouraging for listeners because, like, in the Peaceful Press, we do a lot of hands on science, reading picture books about science, but we don't do I don't recommend that families pull in a science workbook. And Jay Weil, who created the Apologia, also said he doesn't recommend anything beyond like hands on, nature study and life science in the elementary, even middle school years. And so I love hearing you reiterate that. And that was, I have in my new book, The Inspired Homeschool, I interview a mom who has a child who went into engineering, and it was the same for them. Like, the child played with a lot of Legos, and they weren't slackers, but it wasn't like they were doing all this science in early elementary. It was more that they had a lot of hands-on projects. And I think that's so important for our kids to be learning how the brain and the hand works together and actually doing things. And then when they get older and they're doing abstract science or abstract math, it makes more sense to them.
Exactly, yeah. And we did a lot of, like, have the farm, learn about bees, watch butterflies, as they are coming into this world. That whole process. So we did a lot of that kind of thing, but not workbooks at all.
Yeah.
Until the older years when they were in a co-op. Their co-op required some of that.
Yeah. In the book, there are so many really good excerpts or kind of like graphs about, blending the timeless and the contemporary in humanities and researching the testing and the essays and exploration and job lists, so many helpful resources. One of the things that you talk about at the end of the book is helping your children have a life vision. And I think so many families are really scared about the future, and the teens are picking up on that, especially if they are on social media. They're picking up on a lot of fear about the future and even a little bit of hopelessness. How did you help your children develop a vision for their lives and work towards that with hope, even in a chaotic time?
That's so interesting that you mentioned the word hope, Jen, because I had told you I'd been thinking about some things that I had jotted down, and you never mentioned this to me. But I was thinking about how in 1 Corinthians 13 it says love always hopes. And what does that mean? And it's not only, it's practical advice for believers living together, and it's believing in the best of circumstances, even when times are bleak, to believe that there is always something good that's possible, which is partially why I have the title of my book, Their Future is Shining Bright. And I think that it's so important for our kids to believe that, to have that more, I don't know if I want to say optimistic, but hope filled view of what is possible for them in the future. And also a realistic view. I think a lot of times when kids are making decisions about their future, they're not thinking it through holistically. Also, it's hard when you're only 16 years old. But one thing that we wanted to talk with our kids about is, what is your goal for your futures? Like, what does that look like, and how can what you are doing support that goal? So sometimes people might think, I want to pursue my hobby, but maybe that hobby doesn't provide very well. Maybe that will actually really stress you out to have your creative work be your means of making a living. Maybe it takes the joy out of one's creative work. Or maybe just because you're good at math doesn't mean you want to be an engineer. So I think, like, thinking about, what do I actually want to do? What kind of security am I looking for in my life? Am I someone who wants to have a lot of flexibility? And of course, like, some of these things we grow into, but thinking about it kind of from a bird's eye view, instead of just, this is something I'm good at, so I'm going to make it my career, or this is a subject I excel in, so I'm going to make that my career.
Yeah, I think it's really admirable that you and Dan were able to help your children have a vision for something that they didn't do, because so often people just kind of fall into doing what their parents do. And you and Dan are very successful. Dan's been, a great provider, I know, for your family, and very successful in his career. But to see your kids actually take a path that is a little different from what your family does, and sort of reach higher in a sense, is also very inspiring, I think, for families. And I know they're going to be so encouraged as they read Their Future Shining Bright. One of the questions we love to ask is, what habit is really bringing life to you right now? And I'd especially love to hear that in terms of homeschooling your remaining 4 children who are at home.
Well, I would say it's continuing to read aloud and continuing to make that a priority. And also, I'm getting back to my commonplace journaling and trying to really stay structured in that habit, because it's just so life giving to not only be taking it in, but pausing to remember and almost assimilating it into ourselves as we write down these things that are speaking to us.
That's so beautiful. And I hope that families listening will also make reading aloud a habit. It's just one of the most transformative things you can do for your family's faith and connection. So I'm so happy you shared all this. You can find Rachel's book and her pre-order bonuses. She's got the interviews that she talked about with Aaron Lochner and her children, and I think Leah Bowden's another one, all at Rachel Kovac, KOVAC.com, where you can find Their Future Shining Bright and those interviews. Thank you so much for joining today, Rachel. What an encouraging conversation.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Jen. I love you.
I love you too.